Good afternoon and welcome to this March 18th, 2024 Finance and Capital Management Committee meeting. The first thing is to offer our sincerest apologies for all people watching streaming today. We've had significant technology issues. We're still working on those issues right now, but those issues are ongoing. So I want to welcome all the board members here today, all the public who's shown up to hear what we're going to discuss this evening. The first order of business for us will be, though, looking at the prior minutes from our last meeting. And those are from the February 20th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to look at those? Are there any corrections or amendments? Member Sykes?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thought you had a comment there.
No.
Those are our previous meeting minutes. We were starting to hear about our financial summary and our voucher impacts from our treasurer, Dr. Thompson. Do you want to discuss what you were discussing earlier, Dr. Thompson?
Sure. Thank you. So we'll cover voucher impacts on public education in the state of Ohio, how it specifically impacts us here in Akron. Then we'll take a look at our monthly financial overview, take a look at our variances, and then have a discussion about the need for a levy. So we have some important things to try to get through, so it's a perfect day to have technical difficulties. I apologize, but the need for reductions in expenditures, we'll take a look at that. Do we need to increase revenue? And if so, how and at what millage level? And we have a recommendation, and then a levy timeline will be set out. Was also asked a question about LTOP and review of that plan that the board did approve on July 10th, 2023. And the question was about how does that impact the 5-year forecast if that plan is modified? And so we'll have those numbers and take a quick review at that. And it looks like we're just going to flip over here real quick to a different computer. So hopefully this one will work.
It's still loading. You want to go ahead and find the PowerPoint?
You couldn't?
I don't know where it's at.
Well, you know what? I'll just start here.
Okay. Just a second, it's still loading. First one's probably loaded here.
You know, we always hear that technology is the best thing in the world when it's working. And then when it's not working, it makes our lives a lot harder, it seems.
Well, we'll take a look at our numbers, and kind of what I mentioned previously are the impacts and where the program began and where it is today. So again, when it began in its infancy in 2007 or 2006, the objective of ed vouchers was to fund schools, or fund opportunities, not schools, fund opportunities, individuals to have access to that were kids of poverty, that were in low-performing schools, and the opportunity to go and attend other schools. So let's take a look at what actually ends up happening in the course of time. So, you know, what's been the impact of universal vouchers? Look how it's growing from just 1 year ago, 18 applications for charter schools to 60. And why is that? It's a cash grab. It's a cash grab, is exactly what it is. And those numbers we know or we anticipate are going to escalate exponentially over the course of time. You know, again, growing from a low dollar amount to $350 million invested into the voucher program. And it would be one thing if it were kids that they intended the dollars to go to. But we know, and you'll see in the data, that that's inconsistent. So who's eligible for an ed voucher? Again, as I mentioned before, people qualify, a family qualifies if they have an income of 450% above the poverty line. That's significant. That encapsulates over 70% of all the families in the state of Ohio are below that threshold. Only 30%, a little less than 30% of our families actually make 450% or more of the poverty line. You know, the dollar amount increases private school pupil funding from $475. Most people don't know that. There's money going to private schools already, and it increases that dollar amount. This is aside from the voucher itself, of up to $1,402. So dollars are following private school students even without ed vouchers. And here you can see the maximum totals of what a student can take with them. Now, mind you, you may qualify for the ed voucher, but those schools have the right to decide who gets in, who doesn't get in, who they serve, who they don't serve. They don't have any level of accountability that's even remotely the same as public schools. So how do you know if they're performing? You really don't. But those dollars are going with those students. So the maximum dollar amount these kids are taking is a pretty significant amount of money. And where does this money come from? It's a combination of our local tax dollars and state tax dollars following these students. So people going to the polls, as I mentioned previously, I go to the poll, I think I'm voting for or against Akron Public Schools. I choose to support Akron Public Schools, but in fact, I could be supporting more than just Akron Public Schools. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, Treasurer, so when you say that these dollars are going out to the schools, it's $7,567 for K-8, for $9,899 for 9th through 12th. Now, let's say that those students decide that once they're there and their parents that this is not working out for them. What happens to those dollars when they come back to Akron Public Schools?
There's 2 head counts a year. So if they don't return before October count, then that money, half that money stays with them, and then there was a spring count. So we could, if they came back in November, we would capture half that money on a return, but not the full amount.
So the money would stay with the private school or ed choice school?
That's correct.
Okay.
So let's take a look at those, at specifically the vouchers. And I know this looks like a lot of data, but and I'm not going to show you a lot of these, but I just want to give you a sense of this. So the detailed data, I'm going to give you 24 data and 22 data to kind of put on both sides of this. I can't, but I don't have this specific data is not available yet for 24. But you can see here 2,301 of our students are that are eligible to be Akron Public School students are on vouchers somewhere. And who are these kids? If you look on the bottom right corner, if you can see that bottom right corner, It says 2023 Ed Choice Low Income Qualified. 12% of the kids that are taking the vouchers are actually low income students. 1,963 or 87.99% of the kids taking vouchers do not come from low income families. Yes, ma'am.
Question. So as the Ed Choice vouchers are supplementing the tuition costs to these private schools, are private schools decreasing their tuition to make it more accessible for low-income qualified students to kind of supplement that? Or do we know what's happening to the tuition costs?
I really wouldn't be able to speak intelligently on what a variety of private schools do, so I'm not sure. But regardless of what the tuition is at a public school or at a private school, if I have a 7th grader and I've been paying $15,000 a year for them to go to school, and now I can pick up $8,000, and that's a lot of what's been happening. And I don't blame the parents for doing that. It's available dollars.
Does the data show, and I'm asking it from this, that more low-income qualified students are using this as an opportunity?
It's showing just the opposite. Just the opposite. Low-income students are not accessing it at near the rate that higher-income families are. Yes, ma'am.
Because this is the number, so it's 87, if we round up, 88% of the students that received it last year were not considered low income, correct?
That's correct.
And so when we're saying low income, we're going by the poverty guidelines?
We're going by the original poverty guidelines, right.
Which says a family of 4.
Right.
That makes $26,000. That starts the poverty for a family of 4 is roughly $26,000.
Correct.
Poverty.
Yep. So autism vouchers, and these autism vouchers are extending the program for kids who qualify if they have an autism diagnosis, are identified with autism, or have an IEP with related services to autism. As you can see, it's a fairly low number of our students, which is an interesting phenomenon. It's been consistent for decades that boys seem to have autism at a much higher rate than girls seem to have autism for whatever reason. I don't think we really understand why that's true, but it's pretty consistent. And you can see that, you can see the racial breakdown for our students. But 134 in 2023. But you'll also see in 2022 that number was lower. In 2024, it's higher. Every year, all of these scholarship students are growing. The John Peterson is more widespread special education scholarship. We have 180 students. Again, more males than females. You can see the racial breakdown of those students that are taking advantage of the John Peterson Scholarship. But just to kind of summarize it all, in autism, in 2022, we had 112, then 134, then 148. Ed Choice was 2,101, 2,331. 2,231, then 2,428, and then John Peterson, again, as you can see, going up each year. So remember those numbers of nearly 7,000 and just over 9,000. Multiply it by those numbers, and those are dollars that are exiting the school district. So that's significant impact on our bottom line.
Dr. Thompson, question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can wait to the end.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you can see here we have transportation issues as well. And transportation is a very expensive line item, and our transportation costs are impactful as well. Now, this is just a straight up bill we receive. I'm not posting it to complain. I'm just posting it to demonstrate, the costs that we put out go in multiple areas to pay for our students and transportation. So any questions about vouchers? Yes, ma'am.
If you can go to, I think it was your first slide where it showed the demographic breakup of students who that utilize the vouchers
Oh, okay.
the most. I think
I think it's just past here. Okay.
And so Black, non-Hispanic utilize vouchers at 48%.
Correct.
Okay. And what do we know demographically? Who are the most in the state of Ohio as far as the income lines? Is it the Black and Hispanic population, or do we know that has it versus like socioeconomic status? Because with Black and non-Hispanics taking up about 50% of those who use vouchers, and then when we look at the income guidelines, I'm just curious as far as that data, because if the income guidelines for a family of 4 is set at $26,000, then that means if you make $28,000, you don't qualify for the standard choice, but maybe expansion possibly.
Well, you wouldn't even need expansion because it's the new, at least moving forward, it's 450% of that poverty line.
So that'd be like a family of 4 making about 100-some thousand.
Yes.
For a family of 4.
Yeah, significantly higher.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get like a realistic basis of the cost of living, the poverty guideline, and how that really matriculates in dollars for as far as the benefit and because it's different from a CEO with 1 kid that's getting $280,000 and then getting the ed benefit, which is happening of $80,000 a year, versus a parent, Black non-Hispanic parent that's making $30,000 and qualifies. So, and we're talking about the same people when we talk about the vouchers.
Right.
You see, both would be affected the same way,
Yeah.
except for one could absolutely afford and probably lives in an area where they don't need choice, and the other one absolutely needs options or their child better service. So that's why I just want that clear picture of who are we saying, what does that demographic look like when we're talking about people getting all this extra money and benefiting? Because we can't be I don't think logically we're talking about a single parent that's making $30,000 with four kids that's not meeting that roughly $26,000 mark that says that's the poverty guideline.
Yeah, and I completely understand your point, and it's valid, right? There are people that are above the poverty line that need help,
That are
clear.
in poverty.
Yeah,
like the working
I mean,
poor.
they might not technically be at a poverty level, but we know that trying to make it with the 3 kids on a single income of $30,000 a year would be very challenging. I think everyone would agree with that.
And because we still are losing, the issue is still the issue, but I'm making the issue clear about who suffer when we talk about the origination of a program like this and who it was meant to serve, and now how it's getting exploited and who is being harmed by it. So when we do blanket things or make decisions or statements, who was it created for originally? Who was getting the greater benefit from it currently? And what is it that we're seeking to do in regards to vouchers hurting Ohio students? Why is it, because I'm asking questions, why is it 48% Black non-Hispanic students that are taking vouchers? And that demographic, what is the socioeconomic status in the state of Ohio for that demographic? Because are they six-figure earners? Are they living in districts that are blue ribbon districts and then sending their kids to choice school? Or are they not? Because it still doesn't change the fact that if we're trying to serve a free, appropriate education for a child, if a parent feels there's not getting served, like what are we looking at? We know we're public schools and we're looking at dollars leaving the schools. I want to know why are the dollars leaving the school? And why is it clearly a certain demographic that is utilizing the vouchers is what our numbers are showing. Why is that? Where do they live? What clusters are they coming from? What type of school districts are they coming out of? What is the why so that we can service the why so that there's no need for them to leave? It's a customer service thing, is the standpoint I'm coming from, is why I'm asking these questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Dr. Thompson, you kind of went quickly over the transportation part of the bills
Right.
that we found out. So do you remember the language or something? When is it that Akron Public Schools is responsible for transporting non-public school children? Do you know that language?
Yeah, I couldn't quote the language, but the Ohio Revised Code with our own students requires us to transport K-8 if they are within a 2-mile radius of the school. Now, obviously, we transport some based on roads they might have to cross that otherwise are inside that window, depending on safety issues. Then when we transport charter schools or private school kids, we're transporting them through high school, which we're not transporting our own kids in high school. So, but that's part of the law.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So that's Dr. Thompson. So that's a significant difference.
Yeah.
Significant difference.
Significant difference.
Yes.
And so when you look at the transportation costs, do you have an average of how much we are paying Akron Public Schools in transportation of those non-Akron Public Schools?
Yeah, several million. It varies from year to year depending on how many students and what the routes are, but they're anywhere from 2.4 to 4.5 million a year in that range that we're spending on transportation costs.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thompson.
Well,
Yes, ma'am.
I thought I read, but this could be wrong. I thought I read in some of our minutes was like 2.9 million this year. That
Yeah,
we
that's
spent
about
out,
right.
For that transportation, which is crazy. High school. This is something that I was not aware of, that we transport private high school students
We transport them.
receive transportation, like a bus picks them up and takes them to their high school.
Or we provide bus passes, one or the other.
Okay.
but not our own high school students.
But they get bus
Our-
I mean, they
passes.
have bus passes, sure,
They
but
get
not,
bus
not the
passes.
yellow buses.
Not yellow buses.
So that's why I want to be
Yeah.
clear. Are we saying that Akron Public Schools, because I want to be clear for the people watching, because I'm shocked right now, if this is we transport via buses high school, private school students to their school, not giving them bus passes
No.
like we do our own.
No.
We do that also.
I know we do that.
High school
Both, yeah.
students are the bus passes.
They just get bus pass. They don't get a school. They don't get
They
a
don't
bus
have a
that-
yellow bus.
or any trip. Oh, okay. Because
Yeah.
they get because that would have
You got
been
it right.
that's problematic.
So
Yeah.
If they were
It's an
getting,
issue.
if
So
high
I'm sorry
school,
if that was misunderstood. No, their high school kids in private schools are receiving bus passes.
like the same way our high, okay.
Correct. And then,
Okay, no.
and there are kids that would potentially not qualify for busing to our school, but do qualify for busing to a private school.
Are they reimbursing us for those bus passes?
No.
Is the school reimbursing APS for those bus passes?
No. No, that's part of that $1,400.
Yeah.
So
Well,
Mr. Chair, just because of time, and we started late with this, I requested that Dr. Thompson provide this type of information, because quite often when we talk about what's happening in our public school system, we tend to start blaming each other. And I just wanted to start the conversation so that we can understand where a significant amount of our monies are going. And when we pay our taxes, please understand that all of our taxes are not staying within our community. That the legislators have passed legislation that will allow monies from our communities to go into other communities to pay for vouchers. So again, the enemy is not within our school system. When we find things that we want to do, that we need to do, and the reason why we have to go to a levy is not necessarily because that we're paying teachers too much. It's not because we're doing this. It's not because we're doing that. It's because the enemy is in Columbus, state legislators and the governor who have decided that adequately funding public education means vouchers. And that is a significant problem. We can't adequately take care of our school system because a significant amount of money is going out of our school system. This is no different than if we decide that we want to send our child out of state to college. We have to pay those out-of-state fees. But now in the state of Ohio, if we decide we want to take our children out of the public schools, then we also pay for the private schools. So that's what we're facing here. And so I just want to start this conversation so we will know where is the problem. Instead of blaming each other, let's start to look at where the actual problem lies and what we can do to help solve the problems of our public school system. And it is not within these walls. It is outside, and we really got to get a handle on this. So thanks, Mr. Thompson, for starting this information. And as we go through this, we're going to become more shocked and more shocked, because there's legislation in Columbus that is now going to allow for those charter schools, those schools that are not charter schools, to still have a savings plan and to take money from public school system. There is legislation that is going to allow facility planning, meaning taking money from our public schools to build schools, charter schools, private schools. So that's where we were headed. And of course, the Legislative Service Office has already estimated that as of next year, we will be spending over $1 billion in vouchers. And that's coming from our school system, too.
Wow.
Make no mistake that this effort has been going on for 20-plus years, maybe longer. The state of Ohio has been held unconstitutional 4 times in the 4 different Duralf cases. That funding of public education is unconstitutional, but yet we continue to really just eat away at public education. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for the information. A quick question. How does also, and do we have the numbers, a 2-part question, students who open enroll to other public districts outside of, like, for instance, APS that will open enroll to another public district, is there a loss to the district for that as well? And
Sure.
do we have the numbers for that? I'm just curious as to, like, all this whole system, how it plays.
I can pull those numbers. I don't have those exact numbers researched, but we can pull those numbers. But when a student open enrolls out, the money follows them, and a student open enrolls in.
The money. So wherever the student goes, whether it's a voucher or open enrollment, the money follows the child.
That's correct.
And so, so that leads me back to my question. The why question is, why would a student leave such a great, like for APS is what we can talk about with all that what is the why? And when I see 48% African American, non-Hispanic, why? Because even if vouchers go away and people open enroll into other public districts, what is the why when we offer so much here? So that's an internal thing to look at, on top of, as Member Sykes has stated, legislatively some things. We have to look at the internal as well as to why would we offer college careers. We have so many, we have Akron Early College where they can graduate. It's so many great things being offered in our free dish for free. Kids can graduate with an associate's degree for free. Why would you leave such a district, Miller South? People come from outside of Akron to come to some of our schools to open enroll. So why are 48% of African American, non-Hispanic students not coming and utilizing the benefits of our school? I know we don't have the answer now, but that's something that I want to be at the forefront of our minds as well. As we're looking at legislative issues, we have to look at those internal issues as to why. Why would I be here to the third grade? I looked at the numbers at third grade or first grade, or I was happy up to fourth grade. Why am I what is the why? And how can we address the why as well to continue to build, in our schools? So thank you, Dr. Thompson. Thank you, Member Sykes, also, for bringing this to the board. Thank you, Madam President.
In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the monthly report if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do that.
And I'll cover it at our next board meeting quickly. I'll do a quick snapshot of it then. But I do want to make sure we hit this. The need for reductions, they're real. But reductions, I'm going to show you, aren't enough alone. And what the levy millage recommendation is and what a levy timeline looks like. So this is important. You've seen this many times. This has stayed consistent since the fall. These are the base assumptions that went into that November forecast. They included ESSER dollars coming back, reductions that were made last spring, the closing of Firestone Park in both ELP buildings, updated revenue based on most recent conversations around property values and state aid, and you can see those numbers. It assumes that we're going to continue to decline in student enrollment. It assumes $30 million in ESSER money supplanted back into the general fund. It adds the debt payments for the COPS deal, the certificates of participation. That is not police officers. That's a funding mechanism that is being used to fund the Kenmore build. And then $15 million in permanent cuts. So that's what it looks like. And really, it's important to look across the bottom. It says ending cash balance with levies, but don't let that throw you off. What that means is any levies that have already passed. It doesn't mean future levies. It means current levies that have already passed. And you can see we go into, and right above it, the line that says revenue surplus or deficit, you can see that starting in fiscal year 25, we start to move into deficit spending. But I remind you, is it that myself and Dr. Robinson and the school board don't know what they're doing? Probably be somebody out there who would say that, but that's not the case. What is the reason that we find ourselves in deficit spending? It's legislative. You recall? House Bill 920, remember? House Bill 920, freezing revenue, and we're in frozen revenue and have been since 2012. I'd venture a guess that most of us have seen a pay raise over the course of time since 2012. If you haven't, you're living a much lower standard of living. So we have to make do with the money that we have, and we stretched it well, but we are in deficit spending, cutting into our cash reserves. But through this 5-year forecast, with reductions, we stay in the black for all 5 years. That you won't find in many urban schools. But there is a story here. So if you look at the next one, it's the same base assumptions, but we know that we got hit with the added debt payments for this building that we did not know. When I say remove $15 million in cuts, to address the question, well, what if we don't do the cuts? What happens? What happens if we don't do it? We stay where we are, and our staffing levels where we are, and then we don't account for any variances in the 5-year forecast. you can see that in 2025, we were at deficit spending on the last slide at 16 million. Now we're at deficit spending at 42 million. So that in 2028, that number goes from 2.2 million to the good to minus almost $127 million. So the notion that we can stay status quo simply isn't true. So what you're looking at on this next slide includes all those base assumptions and includes a 1.3 mil bond levy. What do bond levies raise money for? Permanent structures, permanent things. So that's the dollar amount that would be necessary to generate roughly $85 million over the next 35 years to pay for the construction of a North High School. 7.6 mils would go to general operating. So that would raise approximately $27 million. So this I show in this particular model passing in fiscal year 25. And you can see we go from, put the cuts back in, and we go from $126 million in the hole in 2028 to a $71 million carryover. Now, the caution that I think is very important as you take a look at these numbers, we have policy that says we need to carry 2 months of unencumbered cash reserves at all time. 2 months. 2 months right now is about $60 million. 2 months by 2028 will probably be closer to $70 million. So what that's telling you is even with cuts and even with the levy passage, we still have to maintain a very, very tight budget in order to stretch these levies out. So Dr. Robinson and I have had a lot of conversations, and I know that he's had a lot of conversations with community leaders, and we've gotten a variety of feedback. But this is what we're recommending at this point. Of course, it is subject to change. But what is important to note, if we reduce millage, then you're going to impact the 5-year forecast. It's just how, so if we reduce millage, we're reducing revenue, so we're going to have to increase or decrease, rather, our expenditures. In other words, the cuts have to go deeper. At 15%, 15 to $20 million is in the range of 4 to 6% of our budget. I know it sounds like a lot to hear that number. It sounds like a lot, but when you put it in the context of 4 to 6%, it's a manageable number. So our recommendations are a combination levy, meaning there's not 2 votes. They're voting for 2 things, but once. You can't pick one, or you can't go yes on one, no on the other. It's either up or down on both of them together. It's a 1.3 mil bond levy. All those dollars from that bond levy have to go to an earmarked project, which would be, according to 29.1, which was passed in July, would be North High School. 7.6 mils would go into general operating. And that would generate about $27 million. We could really make a significant impact if we could pass this levy in November of 2024. When does a levy collect? Whether you pass in the spring or you pass in the fall, it doesn't collect until the following January. That's halfway through the fiscal year, so it's a half collection. But if we could pass in November of 2024 versus spring of 25 or November of 25, that's an extra $27 million, which would really help us push the next levy way out, because that's not how I forecasted it. So the need to get ourselves and hopefully convince the community of our need, I can assure the community that we're being very fiscally tight. We are running a very tight ship because we have to. But at the same time, we have to take care of our employees. We have to take care of our schools. We have to maintain our facilities. We have to do those things. Or else, if we don't, for example, you don't buy buses for a couple of years, then all of a sudden you need to buy 20 buses, and you get hit with a multi-million-dollar bill down the road. So you saved yourself for a couple of years. You artificially pumped up the 5-year forecast only to pay for it 2 or 3 years down the line. So we know that we can't. That's not a good way to do business. We don't want to operate that way. So we're doing the very best we can to be conservative with our funds, be responsive to the needs of our students, and put out a good product. So I will send you all these numbers so that you have them. I know we're running out of time. I just wanted to quickly talk about the LTOP, just because I know that was a question. I'm sorry it didn't pop up. No, my attachment's not working. I apologize. But in the facilities plan 29.1, it was estimated that each building, Essex and Stewart, would save approximately $345,000 per year. Now, that was predicated based largely on staffing cuts. So, as Dr. Robinson is asking, I believe I think it's fair to say, in the redistricting plan, to have the option to keep Essex open. Well, how much would that be? Well, because we don't need to move the majority of the staffing back into that building, the staffing that's in that building primarily would be moving into other buildings to continue to teach, lead, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some staffing positions that we would have to add back into that building. So it would be roughly about $91,000 a year. I cannot tell you how, what repairs may or may not need to be made. They're older buildings. That's roll the dice with the legacy buildings that we still have remaining. But to put it in context, that's about what you're talking about, that number in that range. Are there any questions for me? Yes, ma'am.
Back on the levy slides, or the 5-year forecast slides, back.
You want to go to a 5-year forecast?
Yes, one of those, please.
Okay.
I think I can ask all of my questions off of one slide. I'm going to try to ask all
Okay.
my questions off of one slide. I'm trying to understand the timeline of things. Let's go ahead and one more back.
One more back? This
Here
one?
we go. Yes.
Okay.
This is where we are currently, correct? No.
This is where we would be if we don't make cuts. So we're forward looking here a little bit. If we said we're not going to make cuts, we're not going to do that, our May forecast would look something like this.
Okay. And so was the slide before this the one that
Our actual November forecast?
Our actual November forecast.
That's our actual November forecast.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. I guess we can, I don't know. Whichever slide is going to answer my questions back.
Okay, well, why don't you
Let
ask,
me
and
know.
I'll see if I can help.
So in the timeline, we're talking a lot about fiscal year and the $15 million in cuts occurring fiscal year 25. So the year that we're in now is 24.
That's
When
correct.
does fiscal year 25 start, and when would that 15 million in cuts start? If we're talking about
Fair.
we'd receive money in, if the levy passes, we'd receive money in January. If we go for a levy, you're recommending November. Would these cuts happen before or after we do the levy? When? Sorry.
Great
That's
question.
all my questions all at once.
The fiscal years thing is confusing. It doesn't match a calendar year. Fiscal year 25 begins July 1st, 2024. So fiscal year 25 actually starts in 24. So these cuts would have to be made before the start of next school year. If staffing cuts, and well, it's not just staffing cuts, it's cuts across the board. And we're working on that right now. We're formulating that right now. So that would have to be, those cuts would have to be instituted before the start of next school year. Does that make sense? Then the levy would be in November of, the first levy that we're recommending would occur on November of 2024, and it would, if it passed, would start collecting in January of 2025.
So if we did 91,000 a year in additional staffing, do we have what it would look like, 4 years out, 5 years out, if we didn't do the 15 million, and on top of not doing that 15 million, we'd add 91 million in staffing? Or
91,000.
91,000 a year in staffing?
Yeah, I mean, just real quick math here. Let's say we were to go out to 2028 right now. You'd add about a little less than $400,000 off that number, approximately. It'd be somewhere around $1.9 million or so is what that number would look like by keeping Essex open. So fairly inconsequential. Good question.
Any other questions today?
I did skip over, and I shouldn't have, if I can just quickly. I think I skipped over the timeline. Yes. So this is our proposed timeline. So if there's any changes to millage or questions, please call me, call Dr. Robinson. We'll sit down with you if you want to go through millage and have those discussions. I'll get out to you the chart that gives you, you can look up housing values and see what the impact is. I think you'll want to see that. So that's being done for me, created for me right now. But on March 25th is establish those millage rates. And then we need to pass two resolutions. Resolution of necessity, the board saying, yes, it's necessary that we have a levy. Then it has to be a separate board meeting, would be the resolution to proceed. And then you can see the very next day, I will take it to the fiscal office and file. It's not required to be there until August 7th. They're saying, please get them here by July 17th. But I want to be way out in front of this. You don't know what error might occur or something, and we just don't want to take any risks in terms. And plus, we need to know what the millage is, because that'll drive our Q&A cards, those types of things, based on what the exact data is versus an estimate.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for a riveting.
Riveting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I just want to make a comment, just follow up again on vouchers, and just say that even though Member Jackson says 48% of African Americans are Hispanics, but that means 42% of non-African American or Hispanic are leaving the system. But the Legislative Service Office has said as of this year that 32,000 additional new applications for vouchers came in, and out of those, 28,000 came from white families. $28,000. So the issue is not whether the school system is doing what it should in teaching our children. I think our school system is doing a great job. Vouchers, it's the same thing. It's greener on the other side, and people tend to want to take the money and go someplace else and find out what's happening on the other side. But I think that this school system is doing a good job, as you said, with early college, with STEM schools, with our local school system. I think we have some teachers, administrators that's doing what they need to do. But as long as there's money there that says, try this, because everything is green on the other side,
take the money.
That's our real competition. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
I just wanted to share this point of information because we did visit this in a previous board. But to join the lawsuit, if that's this board's will, it's $2 per student. So I'm just sharing that information because there is a cost to join the lawsuit. And so I know many of the larger districts are already a part of this, but we are not. So I just want to share that information.
You got something else?
I was going to say, I thought that was one of the things that inhibited the larger districts from participating was the $2 per student because we just have so many students.
Columbus, the largest district, they've joined the lawsuit.
Yeah. Okay. What a great, in the interest of time, and I know we have another meeting following us, we must conclude now, but thank everybody for coming today and watching online, streaming. We'll certainly continue this discussion down the road for sure. With that, we'll be adjourned.